Alright, well, it's time for another episode review. This time, it's the Naked Time. On Stardate 1740.2, the Federation starship USS Enterprise, under the command of Captain James T. Kirk, arrives in orbit around the dying planet Psi 2000. Though their mission is to observe and document the planet's breakup, they have also been tasked to locate a research team on the planet that had not been in communication with Starfleet for months. A landing party led by Mr. Spock beams down, finding the life support system on the research observation post shut down, and the team frozen to death in bizarre situations, such as fully clothed in a shower, seated at a control console as if nothing was wrong, as well as one woman who was strangled. One Enterprise crewman, Lieutenant Junior Grade Joe Tormolen, removes his environmental suit glove to scratch his nose and comes in contact with a strange red liquid. The landing party is being backed up and quarantined by Chief Medical Officer Dr. McCoy. McCoy finds no medical issues with them and allows them to return to duty. After returning to the Enterprise, going through decontamination being cleared by Dr. McCoy, Tormolen begins to exhibit mental health issues, prompting Mr. Spock to observe Tormolen has a higher than normal quotient of self-doubt. He acts irrationally, expressing hostility towards other crew members in a crew lounge. He threatens Lieutenants Sulu and Riley with a knife before turning it on himself. Sulu and his mind are not life-threatening, but in sickbay he dies after a successful surgery, to McCoy's bewilderment. Meanwhile, Sulu and Riley also begin to behave irrationally. Sulu acts like a 17th century swashbuckler in the style of the Three Musketeers, while Riley revels in his Irish ancestry, locks himself in the engineering section, and proclaims himself captain of the Enterprise. Those whose skin they have touched soon follow suit, and the affection quickly spreads to the crew. As they abandon their posts, the ship's orbit destabilizes and she begins to fall into the planet's erratic gravity well. As Enterprise enters the upper atmosphere, the hull begins to heat. Chief Engineer Scott eventually regains control of engineering from Riley, but Riley had already shut down the engines. It would take more time than the ship has in her decaying orbit to restart them before the Enterprise crashes into the planet. Spock becomes defective when Nurse Chapel takes his hands and confesses her love for the Vulcan science officer. Spock struggles to contain his emotions and affects Captain James T. Kirk when Kirk tries to help. McCoy, having taken precautions to avoid infection, studies blood samples from the planet and finds that the water from the planet possesses a previously undetected complex chain of molecules that affects humanoids like alcohol, depressing the centers of judgment and self-control. It is transmitted by touch. He develops a serum to reverse the effects, administering the initial doses to the senior crew to allow them to bring the ship back under control. Kirk orders Scott to make a full power restart of the warp engines, a dangerous process that mixes matter and antimatter in a cold state to create a controlled implosion and drive the ship away from the planet. This is suggested by a theory postulating a relationship between time and antimatter, but it has never before been attempted. The restart is successful, propelling the Enterprise at impossible speed away from the planet into a space-time warp that sends the ship back 71 hours in time. While Kirk hopes reliving the last 3 days is nothing like what they've already experienced, Spock comments that they now know a way to travel back through time. Kirk's response is, "We may risk it someday, Mr. Spock," with the implication it won't be any time soon. Yeah, well, you sure got that right there, Cricky boy. Anyway, let's look at the production elements, shall we? The Naked Time was originally intended to be a two-part episode, with part one ending with a cliffhanger with the Enterprise going back in time. The ending was revised so it will become a standalone episode. What would have been part two eventually became another standalone episode, Tomorrow's Yesterday. A piece of Star Trek lore originated with this episode. When the script required Lieutenant Sulu to reveal that in his deepest self he sees himself as a swashbuckler, George Takei had to learn how to handle a sword in a hurry. When not needed on set, he would practice fencing, frequently lunging at passing members of the film crew and sometimes pinking them. A delegation eventually called on Gene Roddenberry and threatened that the entire crew would quit if Sulu was ever given a sword again. This is the only episode of the original series where the rank of Lieutenant Junior Grade was shown or referred to. The sleeve insignia of that rank is a single broken stripe, and Joseph Tormolen is the only member of the Enterprise crew ever to be shown wearing it. Well, very interesting story, I would say. And yes, the story does get, repeated somewhat in the TOS episode, The TNG episode, Naked Now, sorry. Well, anyway, so, what scoring do I give The Naked Time? Well, I would give it 5 warp cores out of 5. Join me next time as we explore the enemy within. So until then, live long and prosper.